Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
It's beginning to look a lot like Kaldheim.
Yeah, snow and all. Dude, it's like the fan set of the last 26 years in a row. Like, Norse mythology has consistently been one of the top 5, custom fan set concepts. So to see it finally coming to fruition, kind of exciting. But there's also been a few twists,
I hadn't thought about it that way, but probably I should have. As a person who is a Viking weapons enthusiast, probably would be a good idea on my part. Yeah, all kinds of twists. There seem to be some sort of Phyrexian Praetors hanging out in Valhalla here.
Which, I mean, who knows about that, right? Like, whatever's up with that. But actually, I think that one is unofficial at the moment. But if it is the way it appears, 4 green for a 6/6 trample haste. So already that's kind of a unusual combination for this legendary Phyrexian Praetor. But it's a 6/6 trample haste. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. And if an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half as many of each kind of those counters on that permanent rounded down.
Yeah,
so that's like a shockingly wide spread of interactions, right?
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, you could start with 6/6 trample haste for 6. That's kind of a card I'd talk about, right? Like, you have to get in the tell me more scenario because it doesn't have any particular resistances or hexproofs or not getting doombladed. But, 6 damage, 6 power, a little bit of evasion going on. I kind of like it. Probably not enough, right? Normally when you have a card like this that sees high level amount of play, it's because it's hexproof or shroud or something.
Well, but just on rate, it's not like, one thing we can do to try, like, even if we think that 6/6 trample haste for 6 isn't good enough anymore, despite, the pedigree of, Rorik's Bladewing, who was slightly harder to cast, being a 6/5 flying haste. Obviously, times have changed, right? But,
Rorik's Bladewing, you would build your deck around getting it into play. That was...
But even if we factor for the new times, if you just had access to a 5-cost 6/6 trample haste, you'd for sure at least talk about that, right? Like, that would be like a card.
I mean,
6/6 trample haste for 5? That would be a card, right?
Yeah.
That'd have to be. That's like a heck of a Stormbreath Dragon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's one thing for you to have a defensive 6/6 for 5, and another thing for you to have an offensive 6/6 for 5.
But it's not like you wouldn't be in for a 5/5 for 5. Like, you'd already be interested. You're telling me a 5/5 flying haste for 5 you wouldn't be into?
I am not saying that at all. I mean, but I've always been one of these, I like the Baneslayers a little too much kind of guy. But I'm just saying, when you're talking about a Gargaroth or a Baneslayer Angel, those guys are there to attack and block, right? This guy is here to attack and attack.
No. It's about generating advantage. That advantage can take a variety of different forms.
But
you're going to be disappointed if you try to get Vorinclex to behave as your Gargaroth, but they're not the same card.
I 1,000,000% agree with you, but I would just say advantage is contextual, right? Baneslayers and Gargaroths generate...
There's an amount of rate.
Sure. Rate is relatively absolute, but that's funny. Relatively absolute, is that a thing you can even say?
Oh, my God.
Sure. Translating casting costs into power toughness abilities is pretty, you can write it down on a spreadsheet and decide which ones are efficient and not. But I'm just saying, contextually speaking, people don't just slam Baneslayers like they did in 2010. They're putting Baneslayers in situations where the Baneslayers are beating up on 2/2s and 3/3s, and people's removal does 3 damage instead of removing them from the game, right? Like, I think that Vorinclex is the kind of guy who he wants to appear. He appears on the battlefield. He's sideways, and he's rubbing his little Phyrexian mitts together, hoping to not have to get a second shot in.
Yeah, see, I don't know. To me, I don't see it as him being so bursty like some haste creatures in days gone by. This guy's got a toolbox that he works with. A way to think of this guy is that it's like when he enters the battlefield, you get to 187 another planeswalker. The game doesn't have to already be over and be decided. You can be in a spot where killing an opposing planeswalker in one shot is like a big game. There are even a fair number of planeswalkers that the first thing they do is go straight to 6 loyalty, right? Which gets them out of the range of a lot of traditional types of threats.
I buy that.
Six on a haste creature isn't that common. And it's not like the trample is nothing, because lots of times having access to a chump block, like there's plenty of planeswalkers that part of their jam is that they'll make a token.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's not just about going after planeswalkers, because there's going to be a variety of different potential contextual reasons to want to do this kind of stuff. It's just how much influence do you have over the board? We don't know enough about the new format to be able to be too confident about what are the most contextual battles to be what contextually are the most important battles to be fighting over. But we do know that a 6/6 trample haste for 5 would be a substantial escalation of the curve. Like, they've never done a 6/6 trample haste for 5.
Oh, no. Not only, like, Reality Smasher, right, was not a 6/6 trample haste for 5, and that was...
It was a 5/5.
Monster, right?
A cross-legacy player.
I mean...
Vintage player. But now that part of it's its ability, and, it's Eldrazi-ness, but...
Yeah,
a 5/5 is like, you're in the conversation. A 6/6 for 5 would be unreal. But that, either way, the whole point is not that Vorex would be amazing if he costs 5.
Of course it would.
The point is that we have to consider whether or not this ability is worth any fractional amount of a mana.
So, just to throw it out there on the note of Reality Smasher, charging Monstrosaur, which was a kind of Reality Smasher with a red pip instead of a colorless pip, and then no kind of removal dodging ability, was played, right? It was played as a Teferi assassin.
Frequently.
Yeah, in Standard. So, and that's it's a very vanilla haste creature, right? If you want to think about it that way. This is just not exciting compared to a card like this, which obviously costs an additional colored mana.
Now, but it has that extra +1/+1. But another part of Vorinclex is this legendary aspect. Who knows what all legendary support they make in the set. However, given the legend-centric nature of the sort of story backdrop, it's not out of the question to think that they may have some ways to in some way benefit you for being a legend, or tutor up a legend or something, But, and this guy, you might consider his ability to be something worth tutoring up, whether it's as a form of disruption or potentially as a combo engine. So even though those two abilities are kind of the mirror of each other, they're radically different in actual execution.
It's too bad Legend isn't a creature type anymore. That would be interesting with this set.
So if you would put one or more counters on this on any permanent or player, put double that many instead. So this does a few things. It lets you, first of all, turbo accelerate your planeswalkers.
I mean, double is a lot. That's many.
And but it's not even just when you can plus them. If you would put one or more counters on a permanent, put twice that many. So with this first ability, one obvious interaction is with your planeswalkers. If you put one or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So that's unreal with planeswalkers, right?
So with Vorinclex, does that mean that like you have a planeswalker come into play, and they come into play with a much greater loyalty?
Yeah, so Vorinclex doesn't have the same caveat as Doubling Season, right? Like, part of the reason why this guy actually functions differently than Doubling Season and better for Planeswalkers is that Doubling Season only does it from when an ability, like a spell or ability is, like an effect is causing you to put the counters on something, such as, like +1 a loyalty ability would trigger Doubling Season. However, the Vorinclex, it's if you put the counters on for any reason. So if you just put a Planeswalker down, you're going to just start at double the loyalty, which for the majority of all Planeswalkers, and for a lot of Planeswalkers, means you could just ultimate them immediately.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Right, like that's incredible. And even if you can't, or your Planeswalker's just already in play, the surprise ability to go plus twice as fast as you otherwise would have, that's like a pretty big game, right?
Yeah, you can like skip a turn. Like, so I think like maybe to just in this set, for example, you might have had Kaya the Inexorable in play on turn 5, took Kaya up to 6, and then you can play Vorinclex, do Kaya's +1, and then that would take Kaya to 8, right? Which would then the next turn allow you to do the ultimate and still keep Kaya, right? So that's just an example from Kaldheim.
Mm-hmm. And then another, if you have the sagas, which we talked about, one last week, but the sagas are back, and this time there are some multicolor ones. But sagas are really interesting with Vorinclex. Your sagas will, like, if you play a saga, like if you put a counter on for your saga, you'll get a second counter, and the ruling means that both chapters will trigger.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right, so you get to accelerate your saga, but your opponent never gets to advance any sagas because all they're putting one saga counter on will be rounded down to 0, so they won't trigger and you don't get the effect.
And they also can't tick up Planeswalkers very well, right? So it's only Planeswalkers
difficult.
That can be like +2 or better on their plus abilities.
And they still go very slowly.
Wow. Yeah.
And if they play a Planeswalker, it starts with half as much loyalty.
So Vorinclex is pretty interesting then. So this is like in some universes, awesome offensive combat creature. And then regardless, you kind of have to deal with it if you're an opponent who either has permanents that are relying on putting counters on them or cares about the permanents that use the Vorinclex player are using.
There are a lot of things that use +1/+1 counters. If you have Vorinclex out, do you have any idea how much this devastates? Like, for instance, Arcbound Ravager starts as a 0/0 and dies because of state-based effects before you can do anything. Isn't that just crazy? Like, all those different... any card that's, like, starting with +1/+1 counters gets half as many rounded down.
You can't even...
For a lot of
do anything with modular creatures,
let's
right?
Say you had like Master of Ethereum or something. It doesn't even matter. If you sack anything to the Ravager, you'll get 0 counters.
Yeah, so like it's not even that you can sacrifice 2 artifacts to gain 1 counter, right? You just because you have to sacrifice them individually.
You get nothing.
So it's 0 each time. Yeah, that's terrible for Arcbound Ravager.
And Arcbound Ravager usually keeps company with lots of other things to put 1/1/1 counter on at a time. Like, for instance, Steelbound Overseer would now put 0 +1/+1 counters on all of your artifact creatures. So, like, +1/+1 counters, there's so many different ways in which this, shuts those down. But if you're using +1/+1 counters yourself, this is like a super-duper hardened scales, right? I mean, like, it's not even just +1/+1 but this is like a hardened scales to the fullest.
Could he be on Team Hardened Scales? I almost feel like Vorinclex is the breaker in the Hardened Scales because like some of the Hardened Scales decks are
the greatest thing ever.
Ravager decks, right? So Hardened Scales versus Hardened Scales Ravager, like
it's not even like putting a cranial plating on this trample haste creature is a bad thing.
No,
but energy counters. If this is in play, Aetherworks Marvel is a lot harder to use. It's harder to get the power. It's harder to. I mean, there's just so many things. Like Aether Hub starts with nothing.
Would have loved this
there's
guy
lots.
in the era of Montus Club.
And if you like the fact that this lets you just start doubling effects, there's gonna be a variety of infinite combos. It's not out of the question to start to imagine that there's some sort, those sort of green X many color, whether it's Corda Calling or something, right? Like these decks that have a big toolbox that usually have one or more combos that you can assemble. If you're playing such a deck, having access to one Vorinclex might help pull together some different combos than you otherwise would have gotten. This is another piece of redundancy, for instance, for certain +1/+1 counter interactions, Yeah. There's going to be loops that this is 1/3 of a 3-card combo that does an infinite amount of something. So I'm a buyer on this guy.
I actually had my head in a different place just because he was a Phyrexian. I was just like, how many ways can we one-shot people with Infect is kind of what I was
This guy doesn't even have Infect, though.
No, I know he doesn't. I was just like, if you gave Vorinclex Infect, he would kill him quick. Right? Hit you for 6. 6 double, 12, GG.
That's true. That's a good point. That's actually pretty exciting. Not you gave this guy Infect, they're dead in one shot.
Yeah, he's got some room to move, right? Because he's got 6 power and trample. He's not an infinite amount of room to move, but if you've got some sort of Infect granting ability, Vorinclex could be your Phyrexian Praetor.
That's interesting. And while the Infect decks are sometimes able to put together a bunch of counters at once, this guy's a hell of a card against him, right? He's even too big to dismember.
Oh,
but you're playing against, he's incredible, right? Even if they use multiple pump spells, they might hit you for 2 poison counters or 3 poison counters, and that's it. I mean,
presumably, if you could live the 6 turns required to get Vorinclex into play, if they haven't got you, they might not get you, right? That's the way I think about it.
So I think this guy's going to surprisingly interact with just so many different things,
Yeah, I like the Planeswalker take.
I'm excited.
You were talking about some sagas. I think the sagas that have been revealed so far are some... One of them I like a lot. The other one I like a whole lot.
So Showdown of the Skalds is absurd, right?
Yeah.
Or are you in for Battle of Bredegard?
I think Showdown of the Skalds is very good. I think Battle for Bredegard is woo.
All right, so talk to me about Battle for Bredegard.
All right, so this one is 1 a G and a W, so 3 total mana. Chapter 1, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Chapter 2, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. So it's kind of first 2 chapters, 3 mana, 2 1/1 creatures. Happen to be different colors, happen to be different types. One's a human, one's an elf, even though they're both warriors. So it's kind of in that range of 3 mana for 2 tokens, a little bit of a time delay there. So it's worse than a Hordling Outburst, specifically from that purpose, but on par with a lot of other cards that have seen Tournament Calendar play. It's Chapter 3 that gets you. Choose any number of artifact token and or creature tokens you control with different names. For each of them, create a token that's a copy of it. So Battle Bredegard by itself, if nothing molests the first 2 tokens that you've got out, this makes 4 tokens, right? That's pretty good for 3 mana. But if you've got any ensuing stuff, some sort of Keldrin Outpost or... vampire making flip land or treasure counters even, right? Or, there's all different kinds of token counters, gold that's been made over the years, Thopters. There's a bunch of stuff that you can do before turn 3 or during the course of those first 2 chapters that you can get tokens, artifact tokens, creature tokens of different types. Once that chapter 3 hits, it's a lot of potential value that you're generating. So, I mean, I just think treasures is pretty cool to increase. Right? There are not only cards that get better the more artifact tokens you have in play, but there are some cards that like can't attack unless you have a certain number of artifacts in play. And this is facilitating all those things. And again, besides which, 4/1/1 creatures for 3 mana is in many views a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I mean, if everything goes right and you can afford to wait 2 extra turns. Do you think that if you don't copy something else, you're still ahead of the game?
I mean, it's not the most exciting card if you don't copy anything else, but I think it's still very serviceable. Right? You're talking about across.
No, it's serviceable. Are you ahead on rate without the bonus of copying something else? I don't think so. I don't think you're ahead.
I think in the abstract you are, right? Would you say Hordling Outburst? Do you think are you ahead, or that's just a par value card?
I think 3 now is worth 4.5 later. Like, you're talking about a lot later here. You get 1 instead of 3 out the gate, and then you get 1 more instead of having the use of those previous 3, and then you get the last 2 if you not only... Because it's not just about if those first 2 live. Your incentive to make them live is going to cause you to do things like not just block with them or not attack with them.
Oh, yeah,
you
sure.
know?
They're not going to be put into harm's way.
Like, through a different lens, you can sort of look at it like suspend 2, right? Because it's not even just suspend 2 to get those last 2. It's suspend 2 on your ability to really use the first 2.
I think this is a card that, depending on the tactics required for the situation you're in, can be played a bunch of different ways. If it's 2 force fields, it is what it is, right? I think that the ceiling on it is going to be, it's going to come into play a lot of games, right? And I think that your ability to combine with the other stuff is what makes this card. I think to answer your question, if you didn't have any other interactions, yeah, maybe you don't play this card, right? I think that you want to play this card because you have some kind of hunted witnesses or cats or treasures or gold.
Totally.
Right? Like,
and I don't think, it's not like you have to do that much work to be ahead of the game. But, and when you're not ahead of the game, it's not necessarily, it's not like you're doing it that badly, But, I don't know, man. You like this one better than Showdown of the Skulls?
I do. I like its
Showdown of the Skulls to me is like Escape from the Wilds, Escape to the Wilds.
I like them both. I found Battle for Bearguard to be more exciting, but Showdown of the Skull is also good. But Showdown of the Skull is also 4 mana. In my head, there's a bar between 3 and 4 mana. I'm the kind of person who will play a 3/3 vanilla at 3, call it a day. At 4, we're in the Wrath of God range now. You got to do something exciting to get my 4 mana. But Showdown of the Skulls is pretty good also.
So like, draw 4 is like we're on the same page. The draw 4 is like a pretty exciting chapter 1.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well,
that's a lot more exciting than create a 1/1 human warrior token that you might not want to attack or block with.
You don't draw 4. So it's 2 red and white, chapter 1, exile.
Man, they're safe.
The top 4 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So this is a very light up the stage sort of thing, right? If you're playing this on turn 4...
Wilds, I think, is the closest comparison.
Well, no. Among other things, Escape to the Wilds, you can play extra land, right? So...
But it costs 1 more.
Yeah, but...
Playing an extra land is not as good as costing 1 less.
I actually disagree in this case. Generally, I would agree with you. In this case, I don't think so because you were so rampy with those decks that, like, the difference between 5 mana and 7 mana was often negligible. I think that the difference between 4 mana... maybe you're right. 4 mana and 5 mana is always going to be a jump. But I'm just saying, like, you might draw none. That's the thing, Because a lot of times you're not going to be able to take any actions with those extra cards the turn you cast Showdown of the Skulls.
Yeah, but you get to use them next turn, too.
I think, like, what's your expected number of lands you're flipping? It's going to be in the neighborhood of 2.
Out of 4 cards? No, it's not. It's particularly with double face cards, man.
Double
I'll
face
give you
cards,
1.5.
Yeah, that's for depending on how many arrows you tap in the Excel spreadsheet. That's 2 to me. It's never 1. But no, decks that want to cast 4s, I think it's going to be closer to 2 than closer to 1. But besides which, look, this is the thing we might want to do. All right, I'm totally with you on that. The other thing that's
you also get the +1/+1 counters from playing spells on the next 2 turns, regardless of whether they're the spells from the Showdown Chapter 1 or just any of your other cards.
Yes, very nice.
You just start going nuts with putting +1/+1 counters on things.
Chapter 2 is whipped cream. Chapter 3 is gravy. Yeah, like you get a lot of extra, especially because you have all those extra.
I think Conclave Mentor's day is here. Like, I think Conclave Mentor with Showdown of the Scalds and with Felidar Retreat,
hey man, if you're in for Conclave Mentor for these cards, I think you gotta be in for the battle. Battle's in that same deck, I think.
Nah, dude. Counters, not tokens. What do you think about Arnie? The 2 and a red, 3/3 legendary human berserker. So he's a 3/3 haste with boast. You can pay 1 once per turn and only if Arnie's attacked. You can pay 1 to change Arnie Broken Brow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control until end of turn.
This card's great, right? I mean,
like 3/3 haste that's easy to cast. It's like you're already talking my language, right?
I'm totally in for 3/3 haste for 3, right?
With good types.
On pure rate, right, it's already better than a Phoenix. Obviously, you play a Phoenix for other reasons, right? So, but just power. Casting cost to damage ratio. This guy is fantastic.
Well, this guy's also unbelievable with Annex, right?
Sure.
Or pump spells.
Yeah, he's like a doubling season, right? So if you pump somebody else, right, then Arnie can borrow that power for 1 mana. That's pretty cool.
Well, and it's even more because he becomes 1 plus that number.
Sure. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it's one of those cards though that's on its face, right? Like, yeah, I agree. There's not much to say here.
The only thing is that Red's got so many 3-drops, right? Like, you can't possibly play them all. It is interesting that Arnie's actually easy to cast, too.
Well, maybe you play this in red-green or something like that. Actually, maybe red-green is like a really good place for Arnie. But clearly he's hanging out with Gargaroths or something and better than hanging out with 1 and 2 casting cost red hasters.
Speaking of red aggro, what do you think of Magda Brazen Outlaw? 1 in a red, 2/1 legendary dwarf berserker. Other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token, which are the lotus petals, where you can sack them for a mana. And you can sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, and put that card into the battlefield and search or shuffle your library.
I mean, this card just seems like one of the most kind of pregnant for possibility cards in the entire set to me. First of all, I think kind of like the before and after treasures thing is a little on the nose, right? Like, isn't there a 5/4 dragon that only attacks if you have five artifacts in play? You could actually get that dragon with Magda Brazen Outlaw.
Well, if you do, then you don't have the treasures anymore.
Yeah, but Magda itself is like a treasure-making machine, so I'm not too worried about that. I think it's pretty cool.
I just think if you're going to search your library for a dragon and put it directly on the battlefield, you can do better than something that costs 3, right?
Well, here's the thing. There's this principle which is like you don't have to be the biggest, right? You just have to be the biggest at the table. Right? So 5/4 in a lot of contexts is pretty good, right? So but you're right. You can go very high with this. Like there's no limitation. You could get a card that would otherwise be uncastable, or it doesn't have to be a dragon. Also, you can just get some sort of mind slaver or something, if that's the thing that you want.
So yeah, some of the best gets, I suppose, are like, here's some options. First, there's a lot of good 5-cost dragons, right? Like that you could just easily imagine your red aggro deck playing with one copy of whatever dragon. With
you might play anyway, right? Like
right.
It's just like an
not
Obosh
a big ask
to you, yeah.
And then second, with artifacts, maybe there's some new version of. So first of all, there's any hate cards, right? Like it's actually kind of weird to search up something that only costs 1 or 2. But it's not like it's out of the question in a format where you might be like, for instance, there's some dwarves in Kaladesh, like Toolcraft Exemplar. If you're playing a little bit more powerful before.
No, wait, that's the one, man. That's why I think Magda's so important. Like, one of the main formats to play right now is Historic. They put Toolcraft Exemplar into Historic. First turn Toolcraft Exemplar, second turn Magda. You rumble with the Toolcraft Exemplar on turn 2 after having spent all your second turn mana on Magda. First of all, Magda pumps Toolcraft Exemplar. Second of all, she makes an artifact for Toolcraft Exemplar so that he's going to be pumped forever. And it's actually, if they both attack the next turn, Toolcraft Exemplar actually also has fuel for first strike. It won't happen that turn, right? Because you get the artifact pump before attacking, right? At the beginning of combat, but like, it's there, right? You don't have to have another equipment or something. That's just a very self-contained thing. I think that's going to be one of the most popular 2-card combinations in Historic.
And, I mean, there's a lot of artifacts that you could potentially talk yourself into wanting to play one copy of in decks like that, right? Whether it's like the flagship, or the Sky Sovereign.
Sure.
Or any number of different other vehicles.
You get like one of the 5-power haste vehicles or something like that. There's all kinds of stuff.
In various formats, getting stuff, whether it's a batter skull or a sword or I don't know what it looks like yet, but it's not like there's a 0% chance in some format that you get like some kind of Blight Steel Colossus type dude.
Oh, I don't see why that would be crazy at all. I think like there's probably versions of the Magda deck. I'm putting the Magda deck in quotes in standard that you would have like one copy of like maybe even multiple very expensive, otherwise uncastable artifacts or dragons that you just want to one-shot people with in the mid game.
And like the classic red combo, like don't play any other artifacts, and you get to just go get Platinum Imperium for 4 mana.
Sure.
This makes a artifact for you to target. Like you can just use all your treasure to immediately just search up a Platinum Imperium and just put it in play.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that the only deck I've ever seen the Dwarven Mine played in was like a modern combo deck where they were utilizing some sort of polymorph to take the dwarf token from the Dwarven Mine and make it into an Emrakul. Like, I think that there's a decent incentive to play that card if you're going to play a Mountains Heavy or mono red version of the Magda deck in standard, because it makes dwarves, right? Like, I don't know. It seems like that card has too much rate for the amount of play that it's seen, right? Like, you know what I mean? Right? Like, here's a land that is often untapped, makes a color, and also generates a body that you might want. It just doesn't ask for anything. Like literal 0, just play with mountains. That's the entire price tag on that card. Don't you?
Yeah, but you have to play a lot of them. And a land that comes into play tapped in the first 3 turns of the game, that's a lot more of a tap land than an untapped land.
That's fair. That's fair. I'll grant you that. Also, that's going to be a tough cast in a deck with like, some sort of inspiring advantage, right? Like any amount of non-mountains is going to blunt the efficacy of
totally. What do you think of Toski, Bearer of Secrets? 3 and a green, legendary squirrel, 1/1. This spell can't be countered, indestructible. Toski, Bearer of Secrets, attacks each combat fable. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
This card is hilarious to me. On the one hand, it can be contained by a 2/2 very reliably, or like an 07. Right. On the other hand, I could
It can be continued by a 0/2.
Yeah, I mean, it is the definition of, for an indestructible creature, this is not too hard to contain. On the other hand, in the wrong spot, first of all, Toski itself, right? You're just 4 mana, has to attack each turn, but they can't really get rid of it unless they have, like, semi-specialized stuff. Maybe bounce spells or some sort of a seal away.
Minus.
Yeah, minus some. But, like, regular stuff, for the most part, doesn't kill it. So this is like, an Ophidian, pretty reliable Ophidian by itself. But if you just have like one other unblocked creature per turn, this thing can totally snowball somebody, right? And it's not like non-token creatures, right? Like you could combine this with some sort of like Legion's Landing, things that are very difficult to prevent somebody from getting creatures into play. Even one burst attack with Toski. Because if you're like, let's say you had multiple creatures, right? And your opponent had decent defense. You could just cast Toski, they can't counter it, and then attack. And even if you lost a bunch of material on the way, you might draw 4 cards. Right? That's tactically really good.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can just drop this pre-combat and immediately draw a whole bunch of cards from all your dorky 1/1s, that's already a thing. And it's, again, they need that semi-specialized removal or else, and it's not like even just Wrath of God, right? Like any of those type of Wrath effects is typically not going to be able to deal with Toski.
Yeah, so I think this card is gonna see some. I'm curious where you think it's gonna see play. 'Cause it seems to me like this card maybe heavily popular sideboard card in some formats.
It is a sideboard card, and I also think that it's got use as a part of some sort of aggressive token deck. And then finally, depending on what the legendary incentives are, this is exactly a card that I could imagine having applications as a one-off as part of a toolbox.
Oh, toolbox! That's a really good example of something you might want to one-off. You think main deck in a token deck?
It depends on what the rest of the stuff is, but yeah, potentially. I mean, if you're in a spot where you can deploy tokens really fast and you need to have for instance, the more that people are playing permission and traditional removal, the better this card becomes, where you can just play a diverse spread of cards that make multiple tokens where any one individual token isn't worth very much. So the removal isn't very effective against the tokens to begin with. And then when you play Toski, they can't remove Toski the same way very effectively. I just think that this is a pretty high impact on the game for a card that's uncounterable. Like, tactically, having access to a little bit of this is just a very powerful tactical option.
So I think the low end of the Toski range, provided they don't have specialized removal, is just like you get Toski into play, they don't counter it, it's hard for them to remove it, and you just attack with it for 1 for the next few turns.
That's not the low end, though.
That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, but that's not the low. I agree that's pretty good. The low is they just play something for 4 mana on their turn that beats Toski with value.
Yeah, that is the problem. Like we were saying.
Imagine you play Liliana, where they just go, any Liliana, whether they edict you or minus.
A 2/2 zombie is fine.
Right, there's literally no Liliana ever made that doesn't brick Toski.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it is very trumpable for an indestructible can't be countered.
So what do you think of Realm Walker? The 2 and a green, 2/3 changeling. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. I mean, it's every creature type, right? But when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and you can look at the top card of your library at any time, and whenever creature spells of the chosen type are on top of your library, you can just play them.
I think this card is... I mean, it obviously needs to have a certain home. Well, maybe it doesn't have to have a certain home, but I think it's probably best impact in... Sure, I was thinking something like an Elves. But, probably in a sideboard scenario. It doesn't give you enough, if you're just trying to kill somebody.
You don't think this just gives you enough in an Elf deck?
I think you want this card in a situation where you have a high expectation of having enough turns to get value out of the Realm Walker, and that it has a low likelihood of being destroyed by removal. And I think if you're just trying to kill somebody with your elves, Realm Walker is 3 mana and deals 2 damage and doesn't pump your team, right? Low impact. It's not a fireball. Low impact. Like, this is the kind of guy that you want around for, like, 5 turns, right? And I think that elf decks want to overrun somebody, or they want to, like, here's how many elves, can I count to 5? That's how many you're going to take. Like, I just don't think that, like, I might get an extra card some turns. That is a really good card to have if you're playing against humans, another elves deck. Like, nobody's killing anybody's creatures, right? You're just sitting here accumulating material. This card's fantastic, right? How many turns can we play? Because that's how many turns I'm going to get free value against you.
But like, you can play more than one card in a turn, man. This is like experimental frenzy.
Yeah,
but it's a 2-3-3.
It's not super reliable. Right? Like, sometimes there's a non-elf on top of your deck. Sometimes there's a land on top of your deck. I'm really decent percentage of the time.
I mean, in an elf deck, your deck... So, first of all, if you're playing an elf deck, your deck's what, 60% elves?
Maybe
that's not unreasonable, I think, right?
You might have, like, 35 elves, sure.
So, but, like... and I don't know, I think you could probably want to end up playing stuff like Collected Company or whatever. But, like, this guy's a good Collected Company hit in the first place.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you play with fetch lands... or any other way to reset the top of your library, you're going to start chaining a lot of cards together, and particularly if you have cards that like let you net mana from your elves. I mean, if you had access to stuff like Heritage Druid or whatever,
so
this
you're
guy's
imagining...
like a lot of this is like more than half of a glimpse of nature all of the time.
Well, that's interesting. So maybe I could imagine slotting him in the Collar of the Claw spot.
I mean, the Goblin deck is already crushing it, right? Like, the Goblin deck using this effect, now admittedly it's a 2/2 for 2, but, like, the Goblin version is, like, fabulous. Cross-format all-star.
Yeah, I grant you that. But I think that the Goblin deck... the Goblin deck has a better place to get to, I think, the way that it's currently configured, don't you think? Like, the elves don't have a comparable card to Muxus, right? Like, because Muxus is a material maker, right? Like, the elf high-ends are all about, like...
No, they got, like, Azuri, and they got the one-cost elf that you can pump, or, pay 6.
Yeah, but most
of stuff, they got
the high-end elves are just about overrunning people. Right, Muxus actually gets material. That's what I'm saying. And, like, some of them is material is, like, more snowball value, right? Some of it is damage. Like, it's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to hit with Muxus. But, like, either you're +3/+3ing them or you're not, right? Like, I feel like the elves are way more narrow than the goblins from that perspective. Mm-hmm. Also, not for nothing, the goblins can kill the Realm Walker if they were up in a heads-up situation, and the elves can kind of look at the utility creatures on the side.
But Pyre of Heroes is kind of the new tribal birthing pod that has some implications for Realm Walker. Pyre of Heroes is 2 colorless, and it's an artifact you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice a creature to search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Note, you do have to go up the chain. You can't stay at the same spot. And then you put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery.
If you're playing with, like, you have a tribal build, I know that you were one of the very successful Birthing Pod deck designers, especially in Standard back in the day, but if you just start with a relatively tribal limitation, this card just seems better than Birthing Pod to me. Is that...
I don't know, man. Yeah, no, that's crazy, because, like, spending 2 is different than spending 1 and 2 life.
Yeah.
And it depends. If you're, like, literally all the way tribal, then you are doing some pretty big things. Like, it is pretty efficient, all things considered. It's harder to abuse by untapping in multiple times. Like, one of the places where Birthing Pod actually became most abusive is if you were ever untapping it with things like Deceiver Exarch. But the interesting thing about Pyre of Heroes in this format is the return of Changeling. You can sacrifice any 2-cost creature to go get Realm Walker. And then you can sacrifice Realm Walker if you wanted to go get any 4-cost creature. So you actually don't need to play a tribal deck. You just need to play a deck that has some changelings. Like, if you played a changeling or 2 at every spot in the curve, you've got options. right? Like, you don't actually have to be playing a dedicated tribal deck.
That's sweet.
Like, you can be like, oh, I have one copy of Toski, Bearer of Secrets in my deck. Let me just go get it with my Realm Walker, because my Realm Walker can get anything. Or what if, depending on what 5-cost Planeswalker or Changeling there ends up being, Vorinclex is a Phyrexian and a Praetor, neither of which are particularly popular creature types. However, Changeling has them all. So if you have a 5-cost Changeling in your deck, you could take any 4, go turn it into the 5-cost Changeling, and then turn the 5-cost Changeling into Vorinclex.
Yeah.
And if you're shuffling your deck, it's not like that's a bad way to reset the top of Realm Walker anyway. You know, if you get to keep your Realm Walker and sack something else, you get fresh looks.
I mean, that seems like kind of an excellent way to do it, actually, right? You're probably gaining value every time. You're gaining effective value because you're getting more expensive creatures generally than you had a second ago. I was just, maybe I'm boring. I thought, like, you could start with a variety of goblins that all catalyze into goblin tutors, right? Like, you can get a matron, you can get some sort of a ringleader. There's a wide variety of places that you can get a value guy, right? Like, that will then become a Muxus. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, this is a really solid backup plan. I'm sorry, say again?
Yeah, or a Kiki Jiki, depending on your preferences.
Oh, that's pretty fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, I don't think there's a shortage of things that are powerful to do if your deck is full of all goblins. But I think Pirate Heroes is definitely an exciting option, but I think it's sweet to build around. I think there's going to be 7 bad Pyre of Hero decks for every one good one, and it's going to be glorious. It's going to be so fun.
Yeah. But the one good one might ruin everybody's breakfast, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, totally. Or really just, make the day, depending on which side you're on.
Oh, no. I mean, like, I've been a Deceiver Exarch guy. You've been a Stoneforge Mystic guy. That does not last very long, right? You're like, oh, I won this tournament. Now what? Now I feel terrible that I did that. You know?
I don't know. I never felt terrible from all that, but,
right,
what do I know?
We're different.
All right, man. Happy holidays. Look forward to seeing you next year.
I will see you digitally.
Actually, right?
What? Say again?
Yeah. New Year's Eve, man.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Okay. This year, next week, when we will talk about such things as Gods of Battle and the Big Bad Wolf.
Oh, yeah, the Bad Wolf. And who knows what else there might be.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive to gain the love. It kept me alive. Visions of better weather, light inside. To